Welcome to Business Innovators Radio, featuring industry influencers and trendsetters sharing proven strategies to help you build a better life right now.
It's a great day to get your Black joy back. It's Lisa C., and I'm back with another episode of You Good? Are you really good right now? That is the question being asked in the Black community, but are we really answering it truthfully? And how should we answer it? With mental health at the forefront of our minds, this series will help you identify why you might be feeling more challenged mentally and emotionally. And through these Black Joy Talks, you'll learn about new perspectives and steps to help you gain some momentum and get your joy back. From COVID to killings to pain and pressure to stress and suffering, all of these can cause triggers and trauma that may be affecting you, but showing up in other ways. Today, meet the Skills Over Pills doc, affectionately known as Dr. Alauna. Dr. Alauna is a trauma psychiatrist, educator, and empathy expert with the mission to educate every person on how to break the cycle of psychological trauma. She is the founder and CEO of the Dr. Alauna Trauma Recovery Institute, a nonprofit organization dedicated to eradicating psychological trauma worldwide. Dr. Alauna is an expert in brain functioning and how the amygdala controls our emotions, as well as possessing expertise on the other 6 areas of the brain. This interview series is sponsored by a new movement called Black People Forward, whose mission is to help the Black community process the pain and trauma we've experienced and gain some momentum to move forward in the areas of health and wealth. In today's talk, if you want to finally master trauma you have experienced and gain control over what's controlling you, Dr. Alauna is just the person you need to hear from, whether you think you're good right now or not. Welcome to the show, Dr. Alauna.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Oh, wonderful. Well, I'm excited because I want to know all about my brain and what's controlling me. So
Yes.
I look forward to picking your brain.
Sure.
So let's start with a quote. This is a transformational coach, Stephanie Wagner, and it says, "Pain travels through families until someone is ready to feel it." So my question to you is, as a generational trauma expert, would you say that pain is the trauma that travels through the Black family? Let's talk about it.
So good. Yes, indeed. What I would say to that is it's that quote is really pointing towards what is necessary for healing traumas. And what it is that it's not that the other people in the family don't experience the pain of these experiences, but in order to truly break trauma cycles, you have to be the one who's willing to sit with a thing and really own it, really dissect it, really think about how has this experience impacted my family, and how has whatever it is, whatever the elephant in the room is, whether it's sexual abuse, whether it's physical abuse, whether it's financial abuse, whether there's even religious abuse and some of the things that people have experienced. Where can I sit with this and accept and acknowledge that the pain that my ancestors received, they passed to me, they shaped me with the way that they think of things, and that in turn shapes how I think of myself and the way that I respond to the rest of the world. And that's where healing is. That's where it happens, because to be able to name a thing, to name an issue, to have awareness of it, and to know where it's causing the damage and where it's causing the problem in your psyche, then empowers you to do something about it and to change the beliefs that are causing that damage. So I think that quote is a beautiful thing because it points towards where we are as a society. We get the opportunity to heal.
And where it originated from.
Mm-hmm. So
trauma.
Trauma, absolutely. I say to people constantly that trauma is highly underestimated. And even for myself, when I first came into this space, I was operating as a psychiatrist at the VA. My specialty was PTSD, anxiety, depression, stress related conditions. So I saw people with a lot of what they were diagnosed as personality disorders, a term which I find pretty offensive. And I'm sure patients struggle with these labels as well. And people were called everything from bipolar and borderline personality. And really, when you listen to it more in depth with the understanding of the brain mechanisms, you start to realize that a lot of this comes from psychological trauma, from a biological response to painful things that often are not being acknowledged and certainly not validated by society. So let's look at a common trauma trope for Black women, right? The angry Black woman.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if I'm called the angry Black woman, that is stereotyping me, generalizing me, and also not allowing for the recognition that there are probably reasons, legitimate reasons why I would be angry, legitimate experiences that I have where I may have to navigate somebody discriminating against my hair or discriminating against my clothing or discriminating against my culture or seeing me as less than because I'm a woman or because I wear brown skin or some of these other things. And those are all racism-based traumas that are piling up in a person who then may be more snappy, more frustrated, more willing to express what it is that they need to be said because they're experiencing these negative experiences.
Right.
So that's one of the things that we have to recognize is that there's been so many invisible cuts. I call it death by 1,000 cuts that we experience that are not acknowledged, that we need to flip our definition of trauma because most people think of it as only something like you have to go to war, you have to be in combat, you have to be in the military. And that's really objectively and provably untrue. Every human being on earth right now has gone through this COVID pandemic. We are being traumatized by the changes that we have to go through in our society. We're being traumatized by political violence and a political just chaos. We're being traumatized by natural and unnatural climate disasters. There are so many things that are traumatizing people that we can just break the stigma, break the shame. We can say everyone is experiencing trauma. So what are we going to do about it? Because there's no shame in something that everyone has. How do we reprogram ourselves? How do we create a society that is actually understanding of people's biological mental health?
Sure. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. A lot to unpack there. So we got generational trauma, we have racial trauma, we have psychological trauma. What do you want to talk about today? The generational or the psychological?
I think it goes together. I think that
Each, if you don't mind, while we're in this vein.
sure. So I would say that generational trauma is a specific type of psychological trauma, but psychological trauma overall as an umbrella is any experience that you have that is negative enough internally that it changes the way you think about yourself, other people, and the rest of the world. So generational trauma is just one of many types of traumas that you may experience. You can have workplace trauma. You can have trauma in your relationship, where a violation in your relationship or infidelity and other things that may create the experience and the reaction of programming your brain to be more hypervigilant about trauma. So that's where understanding that even though there are lots of different categories of experiences that can cause psychological trauma, for example, a car accident, it may be traumatizing to one person and they come out of that and they're unable to drive again. And their body is, no, I'm not getting back in this car. It's a death trap, quote unquote.
Mm-hmm.
And then they have changes in their life in what they can do because of the belief that's been shaped, where another person can have that exact same accident, same circumstances, and their brain may not do that to them. They may have a little bit of nervousness when they first start driving again, over cautiousness. But a lot of times the brain and the body kind of calms down, habituates, and they're able to come back to their baseline, maybe with a little bit more vigilance. So the idea is that we have to look at trauma as an individual thing. There's no external bar that you have to have that says when something qualifies as traumatic. If it's painful, it's damaging, and it starts changing the way you think and the way you move and what you believe about how you show up in the world, that was traumatic. Does that make sense?
Totally. So let's dig into this brain, Miss Brain Doc. You're an expert in trauma and the brain. Can you share with us in a way that's easy to understand how our brain is the culprit for many challenges and mental health issues we deal with?
I would say the brain is a culprit in all of the mental health challenges that we have, because that is what is producing what we think of as mental and health. So we have to stop separating. As a society, we separate the stuff that goes on with our mind as if it's not housed in our brain. There are very real foundations for the invisible impulses that we have and the decisions that we make, but we have not been taught about those parts of our brain. I find it to be tragic, but also somewhat amusing that we go through all of the school, all the hours. We have so many people who are extraordinarily successful, and yet they're not taught about parts of their brain, such as the amygdala, the part of your brain that creates your emotions.
You just froze.
Okay.
Say that
Am I
again
back?
About the amygdala.
Okay.
I'll edit this out.
Okay. Okay, no problem. Are you able to hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
So many parts of the brain.
Yes. We are not taught about so many parts of our brain that have so much impact on the way that we think and feel. One example is the amygdala. And the amygdala is the part of your brain that generates emotions. It's an ancient part of our brain. It's what most people know it as the basis of our flight, fight, fear system, or freeze system, some people call it. And it is very good at doing that. It's very good at picking out the worst possible case scenarios and picking out fear-based information and making sure that you are hyper aware of where there may be a problem. But your amygdala creates all of your emotions. It creates happy, joyful. If you're not feeling any emotion, that's not none, that's calm. That might be peaceful, but we are constantly experiencing the input of the amygdala. It doesn't even go to sleep, even when we are asleep. And your amygdala does not create your emotions based on any objective reality. It creates the emotional experience that you have internally based on how you're interpreting your environment. So an email that comes in from your boss that says, "Hey, come to my office," it might trigger. If you've been fired in the past and your boss said, "Come to my office," it might trigger anxiety, and you may be throwing up in the bathroom because you think you're about to get fired. Or it may trigger, "Hey, I just submitted a proposal. I'm really proud of it. I think I'm about to get a promotion." And you might go dancing down the hallway to your boss's office. Your amygdala is responsible for both of those internal responses, but it is based on how your brain interprets that particular scenario. So here's the rub of that. We live in a society that says, "You make me angry. She's pissing me off. He makes me happy. You're making me sad." And that is objectively easily provable that it's untrue. The reason that we feel those emotions is because our amygdala and our limbic system and the other parts of our brain are interpreting it as a certain thing and then transmitting the proportional experience inside of our bodies to how we're thinking. So that means that we have control over our brain and our body, and it's not the other people that are doing it. It's not God or the devil, or we like to blame it on everybody else. We are responsible for our own emotions. But we have to know that's the case in order to even have a chance of fully controlling our responses and our reactions to those things.
Wow. So basically, we all need your help.
I lovingly and jokingly say that I have 7 billion potential customers, but I really do mean that from the standpoint of humans as a species are having widespread emotional, psychological, and spiritual health malfunctioning right now. And so understanding our biology and how amazing the design of this body is, like each and every one of us are super creatures. We're more than just human. We have creative powers and what we think. And our thoughts create outside of us and they create inside of us. And no one's ever really taught us how to think about ourselves in that way. And not only how to think about ourselves that way, but to wrestle our brain into a healthier format, healthier thoughts, so that we can separate from, yes, I'm having these negative thoughts. Yes, I'm having these powerful feelings and urges, but I can just recognize that they're there and I don't have to fully act on them. I don't have to treat myself as if I'm crazy. I don't have to, I'm having these powerful emotions. People are confused about the fact that they have emotions in the first place, but they have amygdalas. So how is it that we have a society that thinks that it's even possible to not have emotions? And that's really where we have a lot of the breakdown in our function. And we have so much dysfunction because people are acting on emotions, but they're not able to identify that's what's driving those thought processes and actions. So we justify our behavior based on how we feel, and we treat our feelings as if they're fact.
Wow. And I think people confuse mental issue that a mental issue that they may be having with mental illness. And so there could be shame around that idea, but really you just have gone through something that was traumatic and you need to work that thing through.
Amen. Amen. Hallelujah. Work it through, work it out. Hey,
let's work it out.
Just work it out. Hey.
So how do you help them work it out? You hung up your psychiatry coat as Dr. Curry, and now you're Dr. Alauna, and you offer programs and specialties to heal through trauma. Talk to me about that.
Unfortunately, we're in a society where we don't even have enough mental health providers to tackle all of the people who are struggling with mental health issues and concerns. And I'm not saying mental illness on purpose or diagnoses on purpose, because most people can't even get to care because of the high bar for having insurance or being able to be connected to our health systems and having enough trauma trained providers to know objectively what to do to help people. So I thought that the best way for me to be able to help people is to create an online academy and provide training and videos in the form of fun and funny. I call it edutainment because I want it to be fun, but I truly believe that we've missed some really important anatomy lessons, and that having a better understanding of your brain and why you might feel a certain thing or react a certain way to something can be incredibly empowering so that you can work on your own dang self.
How about that?
You hear what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Because nobody can control your mouth, your mind, your facial expressions, your body, your habits, and your behaviors other than you. You can have the best psychiatrists and therapists and care and all the money in the world, and you still have to make the decision to control yourself and to use your knowledge to wrestle yourself into a more effective space. Because I think most of us can own that we're extra stressed right now. We're pulled very thin. We were already in a society that demanded more than our capacity. And now we have extra concerns, extra fears, extra responsibilities in this pandemic that we're attempting to navigate under completely new circumstances. And we're having to take in a lot of information, adapt quickly, mentally. And those challenges are tough because we actually haven't been taught how to exercise healthy psychological thought processes like it's okay to cry when you're having a tough day it's okay to not say, I'm fine. It's okay to be like, no, I'm not good.
I'm not good. Which was my next question. I love that. I'm not good. And so let me just jump in right there, because I love that, especially in our community, the Black community. Like I said in the introduction, everyone these days are asking and saying, you good. And the inference of you good is basically them saying, I want you to tell me that you are good.
Yeah, so we can move on.
So we can move on.
Yeah, tell me you're good so we can move on.
Tell me you're good.
And exactly.
So how should someone actually answer that, especially now? How should someone answer that question?
I believe that you answer that question based on the circumstances, right? So this may be a situation where it is completely appropriate to say, I'm fine. This is a person who doesn't need to know all my business. Mm-hmm. I'm here for work. I'm trying to get this thing done. And that is not the conversation that's warranted. But how I like to answer it, and I do it in a way to make people laugh, is that I say, I'm here, I'm present, I'm breathing.
Yes.
I'm grateful. It's a reminder to me to stay in gratitude and remind myself that even with these stresses and struggles, I still can find blessings. I can pick up positive pennies and small things that add up to me to be a big deal. But the truth is that it's okay to say, I'm not okay, or I'm having a tough day today, but I'm present, I'm here. Or sometimes it may be, I may not be able to do this today. I'm not in a good space. And it is just as okay to take a mental health break or a mental health sick day, if you will, as it is to take a physical day, because we have so much undervalued the importance of giving our brain rest and the importance of honoring the fact that we are in an incredibly stressful situation. We don't have much empathy for experiences that we don't have ourselves. Oh, and when I say empathy, I don't mean emotional connection, an ability to use your imagination to think about what a different person's experience of something would be, and allowing their experience to be just as full and equal as yours, understanding the biology that they are wrestling just like you.
Don't you have an acronym empathy for that?
I do. I have the LOVE acronym. The LOVE acronym is how I remember to use empathy in action, meaning that empathy is not always going to be your first stance, your natural stance. Okay. Yes, humans are born with empathy, but the world very quickly conditions empathy and being able to care about another person's experience up out of us. Mm-hmm. And to be fair, the biological experience that we all have is so powerful that it makes sense that I wouldn't hear when my words might have slapped you, because you felt that in your body. I didn't feel it in mine. But being able to hear a person when they say that hurt me, or what you said affected me, and be able to take that as reality, that is when you're using empathy actively. So the LOVE skill helps you remember to counteract that first stance. So the L is listen and look with suspended judgment. The O is observe the emotions in yourself and others. The V is validate the differing yet equal perspectives of all parties involved. And the E is express yourself effectively, creator, because all of us truly are creators. No matter what, there's no such thing as doing nothing. Even when you're being still, you are still creating. So I use that LOVE skill to help people recognize that even though your brain is constantly drawing conclusions, like we're all judgmental. That's what I tell people, like, I'm not judgmental. I'm like, oh, honey,
but yes,
if you knew your brain, if you only knew your brain, you'd know that we can't help but make judgments and draw conclusions and treat our version of what we're experiencing as if it's the full reality. But we can take a step back and, of course, recognize that the way that this matrix works is that all of us very strongly believe our version to be true.
Yes.
And then we clash constantly when people don't bend to our will and see things the same way that we do, instead of being able to use empathy to say, I may never be able to experience what it's like to wear your skin or have your body type or be from where you're from or have had your experiences in life. But I know and understand the design of this thing enough to know that my version doesn't get to dominate or rule your version. We can come. Validation does not mean agreement, by the way. So many people are like, but how can I validate the perspective of a person who's racist or a person who's politically so different from me? How can I validate my mother's experience when I'm traumatized by her boyfriend, but she doesn't think she did anything, and she's telling me that, invalidating my painful experience? The reality is, you don't have to agree with somebody to validate, but you can acknowledge that their version of reality is very real to them, and that the reason they are thinking whatever they're thinking is that they've been programmed by somebody with some twisted thought processes and some unchecked biology themselves.
Sure.
So then, in being able to do that and use that love skill when you're interacting with other people, it helps you self-check this animal, because the primitive, the input from the amygdala, we talked about, you and I in our pre-conversation talked about other brain systems. One example that we talk about is the somatosensory cortex. I know that's a big word. I call it the SC.
Good.
SC, yes.
Okay.
And that part of your brain registers pain, and it does not distinguish between physical or psychological pain. So just the same way that somebody can pinch you or slap you or poke you and you feel it, when people say things that are painful, like, you girl, you look pregnant in that outfit, but you're not pregnant.
Right. That part.
Ow,
That part.
right? Yeah, you feel that sting. Ouch. And think of other things that can make you, sometimes the grief that we've been going through with the pandemic, that grief can be so painful that it can make you want to die. It can make you wish for relief and be so overwhelming to your psyche that you can't function. So those pain signals, that's not all in your head. That is a real function of your body registering. Like, even if you think a painful thought, I'm so stupid, I'm so dumb, I can't ever do anything, everything goes wrong for me. This all kinds, I hear all kinds of psychological slapping happening there. And that's how our trauma, specifically, we start off talking about generational trauma. The way that we're taught to think and speak and interpret all of these things that we're feeling also contributes to us continuing these painful trauma cycles without realizing it, because you absorb damaging concepts from your environment. Like, you made me hit you. No, your amygdala is going off and you're angry and you lost your temper and you're putting your hands on me out of your choice, but I'm not responsible for your behavior. But if you've been taught these kind of ways of thinking, that is how you will process your own behavior, and sometimes to your own detriment and often to the detriment of others.
Wow. And would you even say things that you've learned from your parents, like money don't grow on trees, that negative thought pattern is also affecting you moving forward?
Absolutely. There, even when I think about, let's think about food and Black people's relationship with food in America, right? We were given the scraps of the animals, and we did the dang thing with those. Some sugar, some butter, some seasonings.
Let's go
a long way to make something that seems inedible to be a delicacy, right? So that tunes generations and generations of taste buds towards addictive chemicals. Like, we have a brain reward system, addiction system. Every time you see a commercial and your mouth starts watering and suddenly you're in that drive-thru and you can't figure out how you got there, right? Who took over my arms and drove my car in here? That's your brain reward system. That's your body responding to dopamine, wanting those legal addictive substances like salt and sugar and grease and butter and whatnot.
Let's talk about it.
We have cultural addictions and taste buds that have been passed to us, but then we wonder why we have so much obesity, so many cardiac illnesses, high blood pressure, heart disease, kidney disease. Those things are products of long generational traumas and relationships to poverty, to having less than. So then even if your family has gotten out of that in the last generation, 2, 3, or 5, if we've never specifically addressed what it means to be taught certain things, then we may not realize it. Like I know for me, we weren't poor, but they would eat your food, eat everything on your plate. And you're in trouble if you don't eat everything on your plate. I grew up eating until I was past full because that's what I was taught to do. And then it took me having a battle with my weight and realizing like, oh, I eat far past what I need to survive because of the way that my family was conditioned, but it's not their fault. They 3 generations out of slavery where I'm coming from, barely that. So
food
I'm
is
like,
important to
okay,
finish on that plate.
Exactly. You don't know when you're going to eat again. We may not eat again until tomorrow. We got work to do. So the reality of how we've been conditioned to think about things, when people start learning about trauma, they're going to see so many places where they can be like, you know what? I got that from, I keep all these things. I'm hoarding all this stuff in my house because this is how I've been taught to think about material things. But maybe I can release that because that might be a product of generational poverty. And maybe me beating my kids over them breaking the glass or messing up the couch is not worth that damage to them because I've been taught to think of this couch as so much more important than their mental health. Wow. Right. So there's lots of places where we will find big and small things that we can identify as from psychological trauma and then decide, does this belief serve me still, or can I release this? Can I say, I don't think that I need to be this aggressive or this damaging to myself about what I'm saying or to my kids about what I'm thinking?
Wow. And I'll switch veins just for a second. COVID has been real. Many parents experience the trauma of being a COVID parent, teacher, lunch lady. How great of an effect. Talk to me about that in general. I know you have kids and you were home in place, sheltered at home, being all of those things, wearing those hats. Talk about the effect. And if you can offer a couple of suggestions for parents, kids are on their way back to school, but they could be still suffering from the trauma of the summer or the 2020, 2021.
Yeah, not could, they are, and they will be for sure, because the reality is that our children have gone through trauma just like we have. And just like it's traumatic to have a routine, have a work pattern, have a life pattern, and have those things snatched from you and upended under you. Our children had the same thing, and they have even less grasp of words to explain their emotions or to recognize how they feel. They have a less developed prefrontal cortex, so their brains are immature, and they don't even have sometimes a chance of checking themselves from their outbursts because they can't even put into words what's bothering them. They have been exposed to screens, have caused your brain to release dopamine. So even right now, as we're looking at these screens and as we're communicating through this technology, it is shaping an addiction in your brain that they will go through a withdrawal for when they are back into school. And even now, I know many parents who are having trouble with their kids with televisions and computers and video games and regulating those kids' behavior because we have given them the drug. They had to have it for school, and now we have to get them off of it, and we have to account for the behavioral changes that come from them being so isolated. And then we're also sending them back into a classroom with other human beings after we've said humans have this virus and it's being around other human beings, you have to be cautious. So you'll have kids who are super sensitive to being around other people, and that will have a lot of anxiety around it, as they should to a certain extent, because we have to maintain caution and care and continue to choose to wear masks to decrease the risk of them spreading an extremely contagious Delta variant of COVID to each other when school goes back. So we have to help them find balance and be able to talk about their emotions. And that's what I would say, to be honest. the best thing that you can do. Because yes, I was all of those. I was all of that. I was the lunch lady. I was the bus driver. I am the planner, the teacher. I'm trying to supplement what the teachers are doing. I even had help, and it was still hard. And I still feel shook up from trying to have two businesses and do my work and still be able to try to manage my kids. So it was giving yourself a break, having empathy for yourself, lowering the expectations, and just being like, everybody is alive. We're relatively safe. We at least have another day of breath so we can try to continue to work on it and get it right. I think changing how we talk to ourselves and the expectations that we have on ourselves and our children can truly help all of us get through this pandemic in a healthier way, because we can just say it's okay to not be okay today. Some days I don't want to get out the bed because I'm exhausted, and that's okay. I prescribe myself rest. Like I just no, I'm not doing it. No. But that is really the key to getting through this pandemic, is constantly finding ways to recenter yourself, whether it's journaling, meditation, yoga, mindfulness practices, exercise, a hobby, music, empowering music, reading, artwork, poetry. Find outlets, because the truth is that most of us have been exposed to unhealthy coping mechanisms long before we see healthy. Drinking,
smoking,
hunching, I'm
sexing.
editing, sexing. Hey, you know how we do. So when you have been shown more unhealthy coping outlets than healthy, it's very likely they've shown the statistics of substance use have just gone through the roof. Even car accidents, when you think there's less of us on the road, but more people are driving intoxicated, and amygdala's going off in road rage and all these other things that we're having. So the reality is that self-care, and beyond self-care, boundary setting, and being willing to put yourself and your health first is what will get people through this pandemic. And I tell you that from a person who says, I have my own traumas. I'm doing the same. That's the reason that I retired from medicine, and I don't want to be anybody's doctor. I want to teach them how to doctor themselves, because I got my own traumas I'm wrestling with. So I'm like, here, this is what you need to know about what your brain is doing. Now go on now.
That is very valuable. That is so valuable. And what I picked up from what you said, the word that comes to me is grace. It sounds like moving into the new school year, for parents to give themselves some grace and give their kids some grace, because there's another transition. And you gave a bunch of really good ideas and tips. But what I gained from everything you said was just a little bit more grace.
Yeah. Slow down, be gentle. There is a whole global pandemic going on right now.
And it ain't over.
And it ain't over. It never was over. It was the pretense of over because we were over it.
Yes.
But 100 years ago, we can look at history when we have these type of pandemics. They last for a few years. It was a rosy estimate to ever have thought that in a global society, when you only have about 10 countries that even have access to a vaccine, that the pandemic was over. That's a great example of how we treat our feelings like they're fact, and then want to apply non-logic to something that we just really want to be. But the reality is, until we get more people, more of the globe vaccinated, that we'll continue to have these transmissions. Mm-hmm. And until we have enough people who understand and embrace actual science and not opinions by the people that their confirmation bias is feeding to them, then we will be stuck in this until we truly accept reality. So I think the earth is presenting humans with a choice to evolve or die, I think, at this point.
Point blank, yes. So let's shift for a second. This is a Black Joy Talk series. And I want, if you would, to share a traumatic experience you had that affected your mental health and ultimately, for a period of time, your Black joy. And what did you do to heal to get back to your Black joy?
Easily the most traumatic thing that has happened to me recently is that my son was burned very badly in February of 2020, right before the pandemic hit, and burned to the point where all the skin was burned off of his face. And we had a really, I was there when it happened. We were just all in the kitchen together, and it happened at the blink of an eye. And I can still see it. I can hear it. I can relive it anytime thinking about it. And it was really tough to get past it. And he's healed beautifully physically, psychologically. We're still working on things. But the reality is that was like incredibly traumatic for my entire family. But it was still a gift overall because my son matured in ways that were, really beautiful, and seeing how he went through and his resilience. And it was a gift in many ways because it forced my family to come together, learn how to work together, get past some pains that we had. We had gone through divorce and other things, and we had to come together and work for that kid. Mm-hmm. And I think that it also reminded me that you can't live a life that is completely without trauma. That's not a logical goal, although I think for a lot of us, that's what we try to provide for our kids. We want to protect them from everything. We want to keep the world from harming them. And the reality is that you can't keep everything from happening as much as you try. But what you can do is teach them how to incorporate their experience into their identity in a healthy way. He's not just his burn. We're not just that experience that happened, but being able to incorporate it into our life story in a way that not only helps us, but helps other people learn how to be okay with experiencing their traumas. Because honestly, I think the way that we think about them, where we go, it's such a bad thing to happen because we experience these things so painfully. But often telling your story in a healthier, healed way can lead to financial gain. If you can write a best-selling book, you might turn it into a TV or a movie series. You might be able to use that as your story to get a job or get a scholarship or whatever. Start your own nonprofit organization and help people through your story. But the point is that how we use our traumatic experiences is what truly makes or breaks us in the long run. And so for me, I have wrapped that experience into making myself use my own skills every single day. I'm not only the president of the Dr. Alauna Trauma Recovery Institute, I am a client because I am constantly making myself use empathy skills practice and challenging myself to wrestle what my biology is presenting to me. Even knowing all of these things, I still have to be intentional about putting them into play in my life. And that's the trick of it, is that humans are built looking at the outside world. So we see real good what everybody else is doing. But we have this very fascinating blind spot for ourselves where we think that the way we talk is how other people hear us and receive us. And we think that how we look and sound to ourselves, that other people are experiencing us the exact same way, and nothing could be further from the truth. So being able to recognize that in real time is so powerful, and being able to, I was going to say those words over there, but that was primitive. That's going to have us off in the ditch. Let me right, and tune into the skills that can allow me to deliver the better words, the better demeanor, the better tone, the better body language that allows that person to truly hear my heart and allows me to speak on something with clarity and enough detail that the other person can understand me, even when I'm upset. Because that's the trick. When that amygdala goes off and the rest of that brain is being, Simone Biles talked recently about having I think they call it the twisties, where her body, she's not feeling able to sense her body and orient herself in space. And that's many people who are high performers or have to speak in public. Public speaking is one of the greatest fears that is identified for people in America. And so that amygdala goes off and sets that brain into a tizzy. And then it becomes difficult to clearly express yourself. So places you think you're being clear and clean in your delivery, got news for you. Your prefrontal cortex, that part behind your forehead, I tap my forehead so I can remind myself where my prefrontal cortex is. That's how you have to wake that part up and find words from there in order to be clear and effective, even when your emotions are shaking you up like a Coke bottle.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. Again, that was a traumatic experience for your family. And it just goes to show, like you said, you're one of your own students. So tell me real quickly as we begin to wind down about the programs that you offer.
I offer the Trauma Recovery Academy. You can find that at traumarecoveryacademy.com. You can also link to it through my homepage, Dr. Alauna, dralauna.com. And in that Trauma Recovery Academy, I provide courses and other material that allows you to not only learn about these 7 parts of the brain that are predictably programmed by psychological trauma, but I also give you practical skills in how to elevate the function of your brain to think past how those primitive brain systems would have you acting and able to recognize how to change some of these beliefs and these behaviors. Also, with that membership, they're able to access a once a month, 90-minute virtual skills coaching group where we apply these skills to real-time situations that members are facing. And we go over how the brain and the body is connected to the experience and get a chance to really work on those scenarios. So that's like I said, once again, the traumarecoveryacademy.com. That program is $97 a month, and it's a monthly subscription to access the Dr. Alauna material.
Wonderful. And give us
and of course, I'm on all the social media.
Absolutely. Give us a sneak peek about your new program or course coming out.
Yes, Master Your Trauma. Master Your Trauma is the first
Master Your
episode
Trauma.
of the Master Your Trauma. That is the first episode of the Master Yourself film series. In that series, I will be breaking down specifically each one of these brain systems and providing beautiful visuals, beautiful graphics that help really make the point hit home of how powerful not only you are, but how powerful all of us can be towards elevating ourselves and mastering the behaviors that we have been taught to perpetuate, that we don't have to live in that space anymore. So I'm very excited about the launch of Master Your Trauma, and that is dropping next week. And already there's a sneak peek going on for the Trauma Recovery Academy members. So check it out.
Excellent. So I'm going to ask you to leave a couple of golden nuggets for our audience. What 3 recommendations can you share to help Black people heal from generational trauma and regain our Black joy?
I'll use the acronym AIM UP. So the 3 things that you need to do. We have to have awareness of our identity. We are taught to use labels like Black and girl, boy, all of those things. But your core identity is as a powerful human creator. There's one race, multiple ethnicities and cultures. And you, my friend, whoever you are, wherever you are, so much more powerful than anyone has ever taught you. And so just understanding that nothing that happens to you has to fully define you, but recognizing that you are capable of whatever your body can physically do, you can get your mind to get in line and do what you need it to do with practice. That's the A. The I for AIM UP is become informed about your biology, your brain, and your behavior. It's all connected. There's no mystery really about why we do, say, or feel certain things, but we have to understand it in an updated fashion instead of some of the primitive beliefs that we've been taught about how emotions are even generated, whether we have them, and what they're supposed to do. So we really need to become informed about our mental health as a whole. The M, motivate yourself to use skills. They don't work if you don't choose to use them. So I can preach all day long about empathy, but if you choose to just go with your own version and not even attempt to understand the experience of other people outside of you, then you will have the experience of disconnection, and we will continue to ride that painful roller coaster. So aim up. The up is to update your thinking about yourself and other people. I don't want equality anymore. Forget that. I don't want black and white to be equal. I want everybody to upgrade and think of themselves as a higher being, a spiritual being, having a human experience. Some of us have more melanin than others. Some of us have a little more protein in our hair than others. Some of our eyes are shaped differently, but we are 99.9% genetically the same. And we need to see each other as higher than how we even think of each other right now, because every word you speak is powerful. It comes out of you, it flies across space, and it slams into somebody else's brain. And then they have to interpret it through all of these primitive things that we talked about too. So in remembering how this thing is structured and understanding that if you aim up, that you will begin healing yourself and other people just by how you treat all of us, truly.
That's a great share. And in closing, can you share an experience or successful outcome that someone that's gone through your trauma recovery or trauma program, can you just leave us with something positive that came out of someone taking your course?
Absolutely. I am very proud that even as my team has grown from people who have learned from me and who have taken my course. And there are my right-hand woman. I don't have permission for her, so I won't share her name, but I've definitely had people who have been on medications and do not have to use as much medication anymore. They may still be on medication for things that are important to keep in control, but they're able to face situations that they previously would have run away from, or previously would have had a meltdown, might have ended up in the hospital, but they're able to use those skills to process these situations and respond in effective ways. And so from that standpoint, being able to recognize that you don't have to run away from home. You don't have to, you can manage tough situations and not feel suicidal or not feel trapped because you have a skill set that helps you communicate more effectively. I have at least 5 of my team members who have been like, where were you 10 years ago when I was dealing with this or dealing with that? So I'm really proud of that so many of them have been able to stabilize things in their life that they previously were like, I would not have been able to deal with this without a drink or 2 or 3 or 4. And so that's really where I find success, is being able to empower people, because they're like, it's very unique that they don't have to be talking to me directly, because they begin to recognize these parts of their own brain and they know what to do. And that's where I'm like, because I don't want to have to tell you and talk to you and explain it over and over again. I want you to have that grasp for yourself. So that's the beauty.
Empowering your own brain. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Love it.
Control yourself.
Control thyself. And you guys heard it, the skills over pills, Doc. Thank you so much. This has been enlightening and refreshing. So as I always like to close, remember, you can get your joy back, and it doesn't have to just be Black joy. Get your joy back.
Thanks for listening to Business Innovators Radio. To hear all episodes featuring leading industry influencers and trendsetters, visit us online at businessinnovatorsradio.com today.